Hi, this is Greg Miles. I
Hi, how
talked
are
to you a
you?
little. Hi, I called you, well, your office a little bit earlier, asking if I could do an interview with you. So this is the interview, and I was just hoping you would be cool with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So mostly, I just want to find out a little bit about our aging water infrastructure. Excuse me. Um, and I just wanted. I've been hearing a lot when I go to city council meetings about how our water infrastructure is aging, and we don't currently have the money to sort of kind of do what we need to get it exactly the way we would want it. And I was wondering, first off, would that be a fair assessment of that situation, or
Yes, I think what most people need to realize that a lot of the water and wastewater, as well as the stormwater infrastructure, historically was constructed or built using federal funds. In a lot of instances, upwards of 80% of the investment in the infrastructure was paid for with federal funds. That was back in the 1960s, 1970s, early 1980s. And since that time, those federal funds have gone away. And as a result, as this infrastructure needs to be refurbished or replaced, the only source of revenue to pay for that refurbishment has to come from the ratepayers, because none of that money that was originally there, that was paid for with federal funds, exists anymore. So this isn't unique to Oakland County or the state of Michigan. This is a national problem.
thanks. I was also wondering, back when they first put our infrastructure in, how long did they expect for it to last? Or, I mean, I understand that there have been continuous improvements, but generally speaking, how long did we first expect it to last when we put it in there during the 1960s?
Typically, this type of infrastructure had a useful life of 40 to 60 years.
All right. I was also wondering, does the aging of our infrastructure affect our drinking water in any way, or um?
Well, with the drinking water, if the distribution system isn't adequately maintained, you could get leaks in the distribution system, which potentially could cause contamination to the treated water, because you're allowing sediment from outside the pipe system to get into that, which could impact the quality and the health of the water. In addition, you have pump stations and storage facilities that also need to be maintained, and if they fail, then you may run the risk of not being able to provide, adequate supply to you or to your residents or businesses. So,
All right. I also wanted to know if population is a problem. I mean, were the systems designed to handle our current population, or
well,
because
most of the. Go ahead.
I just sort of kind of imagined that back in the 1960s we had a smaller population, and I just want to see if the population growth has been a problem.
Actually, it's just particularly when the Detroit regional area, it's just the reverse. When most of these systems were constructed, they were built in. Of course, it didn't happen all at one time. As population grew in outlying areas, extensions or expansions to the system were made, but it was always done with the thought in mind that it would be sufficient to accommodate the population projections that existed. Today, we've seen a reversal in population, where there's been a decline in industry and population, where the system that currently exists is actually too large. And so the real quandary that communities are in, as well as the county, is whether one drop of water runs through this pipe system or 1 million gallons, there's an inherent fixed cost to maintaining it and operating it. So if you have less users on the system, that means cost or rates are going to go up because those that currently use the system end up having to pay for that. So we're at a critical juncture where you've got to make a decision: should portions of the system be abandoned or downsized, or even treatment facilities? Detroit, for example, has 5 treatment facilities in the region that supply water. Realistically, we may be in a position where we have to close 1 or 2 of those facilities because there's not a need. Also, the city of Detroit, which at its peak had close to 2 million people, now has less than 750,000 people. All that underground infrastructure was built to accommodate 2 million people. It makes no sense to continue to maintain it for 750,000 population. So with the mayor's whole effort to right-size the city, you're going to see major changes in, again, abandonment and streamlining the existing infrastructure. It doesn't make sense to refurbish or replace that if there's not enough population or industry to support it.
All right. I also wanted to know if metal corrosion was an issue.
You do have some corrugated pipe. That's primarily for stormwater, where ultimately you may need replacement in time. But the real concern is hydrogen sulfide, which primarily impacts wastewater collection systems, the underground pipe that the sewage goes through. What happens with that sewage is there are situations where it creates hydrogen sulfide, or in effect, ultimately sulfuric acid, which is very corrosive, and it actually creates a problem with the concrete pipe, where ultimately the concrete pipe may give way. It eats away at it and ultimately destroys the pipe. So that is a big problem, not only in this region but also nationally, and we've undertaken efforts to try to eliminate that hydrogen sulfide or find new ways of providing what is called slip lining, or new types of materials that we insert inside the pipe system that would preclude it from continuing to erode. But corrosion is a big issue in sewer collection systems.
I was just also wondering, what are some of the problems that the end user sees from the aging of our water infrastructure? If I'm just a guy walking around, what are some of these problems that I might not even notice but are affecting me?
Well, obviously, as we talked about, the tremendous amount of dollars that are required to maintain and operate these systems, not only to make sure that we meet federal and state mandates for both, not only for the health of the individuals using the system, but also the environment, and with the decline in users on the system, coupled with the cost of refurbishment and replacing, that has really driven the rates up over recent years and will continue to. So for those residents that, quite honestly, because it's all underground infrastructure, it's out of sight, out of mind, when they turn on their faucet, the expectation is that the water will be clean and free of contaminants. And when they flush the toilet, they assume that it's going to go away and be properly disposed of. And the real shocker is when they get their monthly or quarterly bill and they see how much the cost of providing that service has gone up. And my message to all users is we're not going to see any relief anytime soon. With the elimination of federal funding, with these mandates and the requirements to maintain these systems, we're going to continually see rates go up.
All right. I also wanted to understand how our aging water infrastructure would affect our environment. I'm just curious to know, does how does it really affect our environment? Like, do you guys have to go in and do special stuff to make sure that, you know, it, it, I don't know how to say this. Do you guys have to do special things in order to make sure that it doesn't negatively impact the environment? I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, probably more so on the stormwater and sewer side. Obviously, because you're talking hundreds, if not thousands of miles of pipe system underground, you can never build a system large enough that, if you think about it, on a sewer system, it's only supposed to deal with sewage, but when it rains, stormwater finds its way into that system through manholes or through leaks in the pipe, through groundwater, and as a result, what you'll find is these systems can't accommodate the additional stormwater going through that pipe system. So as a result, during a storm event, it either is going to back up into people's basements, which causes a real health issue, or as operators of the system, we are sometimes forced to put it into huge basins or pump it into lakes, rivers, and streams untreated. Now, in Oakland County, we treat that. In most cases, we're able to put it in a basin and appropriately treat it, and we meet Clean Water Act standards. But there are many places in the region and nationally where that's not the case. So you have this untreated sewage going into the lakes, rivers, and streams, which definitely impacts the environment. And the only, obviously under the Clean Water Act, the communities are striving to eliminate those overflows. But again, you can't build a system large enough that's going to accommodate a rain that may ever happen every 100 years, an extreme rain event. So you try to do a cost-benefit analysis and obviously take the environment into consideration, where you're building something that takes care of 90% of the events that take place, and on occasion you're going to run into that odd event that the system just can't accommodate it. But of course, here in Oakland County, we operate 4 major basins, and we're able to address all those issues under the Clean Water Act.
You mentioned rain. I'm just curious because relatively recently we've had a lot of rain for the past couple of months. And I'm just curious about how that's affected our water systems.
Oh, it put a heavy strain on the collection systems, the stormwater and the sewage systems. And we did have a fair amount of overflows that had to be treated. And again, there were other areas in the region that ultimately did not treat them, and they ended up into our lakes, rivers, and streams. So certainly it played a significant role in the issues here in the region. That was very unusual. We typically don't see that kind of rain happen that often or in that quantity.
All right. I also wanted to ask you, how does the aging of our water infrastructure affect the efficiency of our water transport? I think I read in a couple of articles that oftentimes older systems will start leaking, and that might cost the taxpayer money. I'm just curious, is that true in our case, or what's going on there?
Most definitely, and it really depends on the community that you reside in. On average, nationally, the industry indicates that if your system has about a 10% water loss, that is average. And water loss is due to use of for fire protection, obviously leaks in the transport of the water. So there's a couple of issues which cause that water loss, but the biggest concern is to try to minimize the leakage, because not only is, if you think about it, you're paying for that water to be treated, and now if you're losing it, that's a waste of money. But even more importantly, the loss of that water ultimately ends up in the sewer system and then is treated again. So it's kind of a double whammy. You're not only paying to have it treated to be used as drinking water, but when you lose it, then it ends up going in the sewer system, and you end up losing it or losing money again by paying for that to be treated. Here in this region, you have communities such as Farmington Hills that have 4% water loss, which is phenomenal. I mean, so very little. It's a very tight system, very few leaks. City of Detroit, I think, has much greater challenges because of the age of their infrastructure. They publish 16 to 18%, but quite honestly, I think it's much higher than that. It could be upwards of 30% in certain areas, which is a tremendous loss. That actually is equivalent to some third world countries in terms of how much water loss they're experiencing. And it's a constant challenge to identify where these leaks are occurring and how to correct those.
All right. Another question I wanted to ask is, does the aging of our water infrastructure cause water main breaks?
Yes, most definitely. With the change in the weather, which obviously creates heaving underground, that does put stress on the distribution system. And if it's a newer pipe system, it obviously can accommodate that change in ground movement. But as pipes age, they weaken, and ultimately that's what causes the breaks, either in extreme cold weather or actually an extreme change in the weather patterns, whether it be extreme cold or in heat. And that's why you start seeing a number of breaks that have to be addressed. As an operator, we're always looking for technologies to try to be predictive. In other words, try to identify areas where there are potential leaks where we can correct them before a collapse takes place. Because once a collapse takes place, it's a very expensive fix. It's something that requires digging up the pipe and replacing it, as opposed to if it was just a leak, there are ways of lining that pipe, obviously providing an inner sleeve that strengthens the pipe and eliminates the leakage. Yeah, but the real challenge, of course, is identifying where those leaks exist so that you can undertake this technology.
I was wondering, would you be able to tell me how many main breaks in Oakland County are caused by our aging, the effects of the aging water system, or would you not be able to? I'm just curious.
That would be no, I wouldn't be able to. That would be very difficult to do.
All right. I think you said it, but I also read it somewhere else that we do need to repair a lot of these systems, and the cost of doing so is cost prohibitive, so that a long-term solution to a lot of these problems would be difficult. I was wondering, if we continue to do things exactly as we are, what do you think the effects of that might be in the future?
Well, you're going to see a lot of communities deal with their needs through a very reactive approach. In other words, deal with it on an emergency-by-emergency basis, which is extremely expensive when you do have collapses or catastrophic events because of failure of pump stations and such. I really think we have to move towards this predictive approach. In other words, a much more effective asset management system where we're identifying where there are potential areas of need. And then I believe beyond the traditional approach, we've got to utilize technology more so, which is very challenging in this industry because, as I fondly say, most of these systems are run by engineers who are very risk adverse, but understandably so because they're dealing with people's health and they're dealing with the environment. But I really think we need to take advantage of technology. I think that'll help lower the cost and improve efficiency. And then I think as far as the financing, we mentioned the federal funding that's gone away. I really think we need to revisit as a priority in this nation a national program that addresses some type of contribution to refurbishing these systems. And I don't expect that we'd go back to the days of providing 80% funding, but I think you could probably put a realistic program together where the federal government would provide 1/3 of the required funds. The state could continue providing low-interest loans for 1/3, and then the ratepayers, the users of the system, would then have to contribute 1/3, either through their reserves or through rate increases. To me, that's a very pragmatic, prudent approach to trying to address these issues long term.
Right. Do you feel that the people in government are aware of these issues and are working towards them, or do you feel that there isn't enough being done on these issues?
It depends on what level of government. My sense is at the local level, since this is a real basic need of residents and businesses, that your local officials are very well aware of the cost associated with these systems and obviously the need. And certainly operators at the county level, we also see that need. When it reaches the state or federal level, I just don't think it is given the priority that it should be. As I call it, there's always I call it the flavor of the day. There's always other priorities in Washington, for example, that take precedent. And that's not to say that those other priorities are not critical or of concern. It's just that when you're talking about an issue that impacts every community in this nation, that there really needs to be a permanent solution, particularly from the federal level, that looks inward at our domestic needs and says, this is a priority and we should participate.
All right. Well, that's most of the questions I had written up to ask you. I was wondering if there was anything else you'd like to say about these issues, or.
No, I think you did a really good job of identifying a lot of not only the technical but all the political aspects that have to be addressed. So I commend you. No, I think you did a fine job.
All right. Well, thanks. That's pretty much it. So,
okay.
Thanks for your time.
Hey, my pleasure. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.